Explore the history, relationships, expertise, and data that go into ensuring Stine growers get maximum yield potential. This is the Stine Seedcast. Here's your host, David Thompson.
Hello, and welcome to the Stine Seedcast. I'm your host, David Thompson, National Marketing and Sales Director for Stine Seed Company. We've got another great episode lined up with special guests, expert insights, and discussion on everything you need to know about maximizing yield potential. On today's episode, our very special guests are Christian and Gary Clem of ALMACO. Welcome to the show, guys.
Well, thank you for having us.
David, thanks for having us in.
So as most everyone knows, Stine Seed Company is a company that's driven by its research. And for us to plant, manage, and harvest more than 1 million research plots each year requires some pretty sophisticated equipment. ALMACO is a custom seed research equipment company that's actually headquartered in Nevada, Iowa. They have a deep history and a legacy of innovation and one of our most trusted partners in the seed business. We're really excited to chat with them today about what ALMACO does, including how they got their start and where they are today. We're also going to talk about how ALMACO works with companies like Stine to drive research and innovation through planting and harvesting equipment, including their ALMACO R2 twin plot combines. So let's get started. Well, so first of all, I've been wanting to do this episode for a little while now. If you're in the seed business or even in agriculture, I think a lot of people have heard of ALMACO, and they probably don't even know, exactly all the things you're involved in. But anyway, looking forward to learning more about your company. So tell us a little bit about what ALMACO does.
Sure. So at ALMACO, we design, manufacture, and support technologies used in the global seed industry. And this consists of sophisticated planting, harvesting, data collection, seed processing, and pollination technologies. And so our niche is really the rapid transformation of product concepts into reality. And so we're the folks that take an idea that somebody drew on a cocktail napkin, and we bring that to reality in the field 6 months later. And that's what we're really good at. We partner with clients who value automation, technology, and customization.
And of course, for our part, we are focused on corn and soybean. So I know you work in those arenas. Just incidentally, are there other crop things that you're doing besides those crops?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in an endless number of markets in regards to the types of crops that our equipment is used in, and Gary can chime in here, but obviously corn and soybean, wheat, canola, rice, sunflowers. What else am I forgetting there, Dad?
I think you've covered it.
Awesome. So I guess for starters, I always like to have a ground set to say, okay, well, tell me a little bit about your company. We're talking briefly. Company's been around for a really long time, and that's really exciting. So if you would, tell me kind of the history of how you got to where you are today.
Our company dates back to the 1880s and is deeply rooted in the blacksmithing industry. Our grandfathers were blacksmiths, and Allen Machine Shop was the original name of the company, and it was in Ames, Iowa. And eventually it was purchased by Bill Allen, who would have been married to my grandfather's sister. And then eventually Wendell Allen took over the business and changed it to Allen Machine and Supply. And at that time, they had worked with USDA in building some threshers that were used. In fact, back in the 50s, there was a movement out of Mexico City called CIMMET. And Norman Borlaug headed this up, and he was the one that they say saved millions of lives in India by the hybrid wheat that he was able to work with. He coordinated that with a group out of Washington State, and they actually designed and built what was called the Vogel thresher. And Orville Vogel was one of the breeders, scientists out of Washington State with USDA. And because it was USDA, they had to put equipment out to bid. And so Allen Machine somehow worked into the bidding process and was awarded the bid for some of the first machines that were developed and used in the process of developing this hybrid wheat. I was gifted with the meeting of Norman Borlaug in Mexico many years ago. He was quite a gentleman and had a tremendous work ethic. But out of that, a lot of smaller equipment was developed. And when I returned to Ames in 1972 to go to work for the Allen Machine and Supply Company, they did not make a combine. All they made was what would be called stationary thrashers. And there was an attempt on the part of Allen Machine cooperating with some other people to build a small little combine, which never was successful. They spent approximately 4 years in trying to make this little machine work. And at that time, Iowa State University, Dr. Walt Fair and Bob Clark with USDA were interested in building their own combine. And they came to us, and we had an agreement to work on a time and material basis and develop a combine that would be self-cleaning. And what that means is in soybeans, when we harvest a test, if that seed is significant in yield, we're going to replant it. So we can't mix one plot with the other. So when we harvest a plot within seconds, that machine has to clean itself out. And that's what we developed. We developed the first self-cleaning combine that was recognized in the industry as the one to use. And I campaigned that machine to various people after the first year of production. Actually ended up in the Delta in Mississippi at the largest USDA research center and was successful in demonstrating that machine to them. And little by little, the first year we built 2, next year we built 4, then we built 8, and then it just kept going. But out of that, we have really enjoyed a relationship with the Stines and all of their people that work for Stines. I spent 50 years with Harry Stine, and I seen it from the beginning. When Harry was first developing a line of seed that was being shipped back and forth to South America for winter nursery work. And out of that, they finally ended up buying what we called our SBC-20 row crop head machine. And it was specially built to feed the soybeans into the machine, and they were able to use it in many ways to increase the amount of tests that they were doing. But with this machine, it was larger than what was really needed for the initial soybean testing. And what that means, they were planting hill plots, which would be 6 seed in a hill. And they would pull those plants up in the fall when they were ready and put them through a hand thresher. And it was a very intense labor job to do this. Well, we had the opportunity to build or to bid on a project in Pakistan where they wanted 6 little combines. And we took and designed on paper a machine that we thought would work for their application, and we sent the bid in. Now, when you send the bid in, you had to send in 20% of what the bid amount was as earnest money, and that kept the flim-flam out. So we ended up getting the order, and we went to work and built the prototype, and we worked with some John Deere retirees and tuning it in. And once we were successful, we sent the machines off to Pakistan, and I kept the prototype. And I visited with Bill Eby about this prototype and ended up taking it down to Stine's, and we tested it in the field with the idea we were going to put a row crop header on this machine, which we did the following year. And this machine was used to now harvest in the row rather than in the hill these soybean plots. And these soybean plots are the only seed in the world so far that they have bred. And this little machine would travel approximately 5 foot, harvest the seed, deliver it to the operator, and they could either bag it. At a later date, we put volumetric measurements on the machine. So if the soybean yield went above a certain mark, you saved it. If it didn't, it went in the bag. But this worked real successful, and this enabled Stine to automate their basic research needs, and they expanded on it. And we automated them to the point where they probably had more equipment than anyone in the industry once we got rolling. In the early days, we would sell 2 or 4 or 6 machines a season to the Stines. And I would always work with Harry on discounting these machines based upon the operating line of credit that I was going to have to go borrow at the bank to build them. And Harry actually was a wonderful person to work for. And I'd like to really emphasize the reason that Stine Seed Company is successful is because of the work ethic that Harry has instilled in all of his people. These people have a work ethic that is beyond the norm. And when it's time to plant or time to harvest, there's no clock. We've got to do it and get it done, and that's pretty much the way they operate. But out of that, we have had some great relationships with people like Bill Eby. And Bill, of course, is the one that headed up the breeding program. And it's just been a pleasure to work with him. And now it's been passed on to some other people. Bill's still involved, of course. But it's the work ethic that has put Stine where they're at today. I recently, several years ago, we had an opportunity to bid on a large project in Brazil for soybeans. And I remember the individual that was in the public sector as a breeder, very renowned, I won't mention his name, said that out of this project, they were going to catch Harry Stine. Well, I'd put my money on Harry Stine. You aren't going to catch Harry. And Harry was very unique in the fact that he licensed his soybeans to begin with. He didn't try to sell them under his own name. And out of the licensing, he was very successful. So that's kind of just a general overview of what's transpired in our career with the Stine people.
And that's a fantastic place to start. There are so many names there that come back around again to our own history. You know, you mentioned Bill, of course, and Harry, and you've got Walt Fair in there, and all these things. And so we've talked about some of that history, and it's so intertwined. And that's why I think it's great for us to have this conversation because, you know, the two kind of go hand in hand, right? We couldn't have evolved the seed business probably without the work that ALMACO has done to help seed companies. So we're talking about harvest equipment here because that's kind of how you guys got your start with us. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating, you touched on it, is how specialized that equipment needs to be from an engineering perspective, you know. And I think you mentioned, well, there's a couple different things. One is, of course, we're taking weighed measurements, right? So whatever's coming through that combine, we have to catch it all, and then we have to clear it all. So talk to me a little bit about the process, or what's the unique process around that versus obviously a much larger combine or a much larger piece of equipment. What does it take to do really plot work?
Well, in the early stages of screening plots, a breeder normally would go out into a breeding plot and look at soybeans and use his best judgment as to what should be moved up into the next generation. Harry didn't necessarily believe in that. He thought the numbers ought to dictate what is going to get moved up. And being a numbers guy, he set his program to judge each and every test on its yield. And if it didn't yield more than the prior year's stuff, it got thrown out. And he kept advancing the stuff that really went to the top. And it wasn't someone just guessing that I think this one here is going to do the job. It was the numbers that was what was called out and was advanced in the future. So it is a unique system that they developed within their company to do what they've done. And of course, we all know they've got one of the highest yielding soybeans in the whole soybean industry. They always won the Iowa variety testing. They always were number one there. It was just exciting to see all of this happen.
I think, in regards to the equipment itself, the thing that differentiates the equipment that we're developing and manufacturing is that a commercial machine is going to go into a field and it's going to harvest or plant the same variety all day long. And what we're dealing in are what are called test plots. And this is maybe a single row or 2 rows or 4 rows that are maybe 10 feet long, for example. And then there's going to be a 30-inch alley or break where nothing is planted, so that there's a physical barrier, and then there's another 10 feet planted, and then another 10 feet. And so there's millions of these test plots planted every year. And our equipment has the ability, the planters, to go through that field and physically change varieties every 5 feet, and then go to a different variety, and then a different variety, and not mix those varieties and do that all day long. And then in the same breath, the combines can come back in the fall. They'll run that 10 feet, harvest that material, and in 12 seconds, that harvester will clean itself out 99.8%. I mean, there may be one kernel or one seed left in there, and then go on to the next test plot. And so it's very challenging to be able to do that. But it's also crucial, especially in soybean breeding programs, that you can't have any contamination from plot to plot to plot.
And that's a great point. Like in the case of Stine, as you say, Gary, if you're living on dying on those numbers, then you got to trust that that number is what you think, what it says it is, right? And so that clean out ability and everything, I'm fascinated by all the work that goes into those machines to make them capture every last seed and then make sure that seed gets moved out, into, so the next one can come in. So we talked a little about the harvesting equipment. You mentioned planters. So, you also are involved in planters. So talk a little bit about what you guys do there for the seed industry as it relates to planting.
Sure. So we actually offer, we have 6 main product lines that consist of over 70 different models in there. And these include the planting technology, harvesting, we've been talking about combines, data collection to be able to collect the yield data or maybe the intrinsic properties of the seed processing lines to be able to prep the seed for next year's planting, pollination technologies, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit, and also after the sales service. And so, there is no large ALMACO dealer network. And so the equipment's very sophisticated. And so it needs to have maintenance and upkeep and upgrades. And that's a large part of our business is cycling the machines back through on maybe an annual basis or every few years. The planting technology, we've got a number of different types of planters. Plant meters, I guess is what I would say, that are putting seed in the ground, everything from cone-type seeders, which Stine is heavily involved with, to precision-spaced vacuum planters. And we put those on a wide variety of different types of planters to where we actually manufacture our own toolbars from scratch, or we can take a commercial planter and adapt our technology to those, whether it's one that's made here in the United States or maybe it's one that's manufactured in Brazil or in Argentina, something along those lines.
And as I recall, from our experience with planters, going back, I think there were a lot of things done with check wires, right? Probably when Harry was working, that was kind of how that stuff was started when you were doing in rows. And I know we had done some stuff with GPS for planting. And I think in between there was maybe something, transmission read systems.
Correct.
So back to the idea that we were always trying to get more and more done, more efficiently. And like I said, you guys had to probably create all of those solutions to help meet the need. So that's maybe my next question is, again, you guys work with a whole lot of different companies out there, and I know you work really, really well with us. And I know even from the smaller 2-row combines, I remember our research team telling me, hey, these come and they're set up for Stine. Like Stine has their way they want it. Presumably that means every other company has a way that they want theirs. So I assume there's always challenges when you're delivering a solution, highly customized solution for a customer. Is every one truly kind of unique in its own way?
Yes, they are. And that's been one of the problems in the early stages of developing equipment, is everybody had their own idea how they wanted to do things. And I learned early on that you must be able to get a piece of equipment delivered to a customer, get it set up, and get them trained in order to get paid. And so I took on the job of delivering probably for 15 years all the combines that were made by ALMACO. And one of the benefits of this was the learning that was gained by dealing directly with an individual, say in the middle of Mississippi. What works in Iowa doesn't necessarily work in Mississippi. And it's because of the different varieties of soybeans. Mississippi's got soybeans that go shoulder high. And you've got different things you have to do to be able to harvest them. But out of delivering these machines and making and building relationships with these people, we were able to gain a tremendous insight into things that we needed to do to better satisfy certain parts of the country where agriculture changes. You know, everything isn't just like Iowa. And as you travel throughout the soybean regions, particularly of North America, things change, and you have to be able to adapt to those. Some people started with the bag and tag, which was the original process. Now it's all electronically looked at and decided which is the high yielders and separated out. And it's been quite a challenge to develop equipment for each and every individual seed company in the country. But yes, there's a Stine way, and we've really got that down now as to what they want and how they want it. And I also want to say at this point, to date, Bill Eby holds the record for the number of plots harvested in one day. And that is outstanding in the industry. And I've heard other people say, you know, we quit at 5 o'clock and we could see the Stine people over there working still when we came back from supper, you know. And so they have their way of doing things, and obviously it's been the right way.
You mentioned bag and tag. So just a little bit for background purposes, and I think this is what you're referring to. Even in the time that I've been in the industry, a lot of what Stine would harvest in the fall would go into the mesh bags.
Right.
So they'd harvest the seed, they'd put it in a mesh bag, they'd put a tag on it, throw it in the back, and then that would come back and be gone through later in the fall. And today, at least in our system, we don't rely on that as much. A lot of the seed from remote locations does not actually come back to the research location. They just they take the data, they gather the data, and then we have other mechanisms that we have that seed, pure seed of that same variety that we can go back to. So just, again, to be more efficient. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the product that's come out in the last couple of years, and that's the R2 combine, if we can talk about that. And I guess we had, for the last couple of years, we've had the pleasure of getting to show that machine at Farm Progress Show. And we really wanted to do that because I think it's such a great example of driving research forward, and it's such an integral part of what we do as a company. And I can tell you from our standpoint, farmers really enjoy looking at the machine and the innovation that you guys created around that. So if you would, describe a little bit about what that machine is and what it does and how it's different from maybe the machines you've had in the past.
Sure. So in 2015, we created the first what was called R1, and the R stands for rotary. It's got a rotary threshing cylinder in it. And traditionally, up until that point in time, all of our combines had what would you call a conventional cylinder that would spin the same direction as the tires as you drove through. And so we knew that it was time to come out with a new model and new technology. We were looking to do something, I think, that we would refer to as, we wanted to see some leapfrog technology, really make some great gains. And so 2015, we launched the R1 and demoed that around the country, and then I think we sold the first 3 the next year. And so that product was very successful, and so we're asking ourselves, what's next? Well, the twin combine market was in high demand, and there was a lot of the yellow combines being used, the commercial machines that were being modified. And so we recognized the need to take this single R1 technology and create an R2. And so the R2 is really a remarkable machine. And so it's the only true twin plot machine on the market that has 2 completely separate threshing and cleaning chambers on it that make it impossible to have cross-contamination back and forth. In other words, it's not a split combine. It's a true twin. And it's got a patented top-loading rotor with a high torque design drive system. And this rotor and this torque design that we have enables the combine to get into the field far earlier than you'd be able to do in a season with a traditional type threshing cylinder. It allows you to start the season sooner. It allows you to start harvesting in the morning earlier and to harvest later through the day. And, in the end, it allows you to get your plots out of the field faster. It's got a custom airlock system in it and cleaning system in it that really, truly does allow this machine to be able to clean itself out to that 99.8% factor as you're going through these test plots. And so this machine is a true multi-crop machine. We designed it specifically to be able to work in multiple different crops. It has concave and sieve set up in it that are very easily interchangeable, and the head design is interchangeable to where this one machine can go from soybeans to corn in approximately 30 minutes with two people, and you're ready to go. It's also being used in canola and also in wheat. It's just a really amazing machine to see the plot speed that this machine can attain, the numbers of plots that it can get out of the field. I believe one of the Stine machines harvested 75,000 plots in 15 days. And I mean, that's unheard of. And so it's just, it's kind of changed the game. It's really all about trying to provide value to our customers, to Stine, to say, hey, look at what we brought to the table, and look at what this can do for your research program. Some of the feedback that we've gotten is that there's a feeling that the data that's coming out of the R2 combines is much more accurate than the traditional two-row, what we would call SPC 20 machines. And that's a big deal, obviously, is data accuracy, because that's what the name of the game is getting the data and getting it as quick as possible. It's been fun for me to be in the field with those machines to where the operator will finish a block and stop and then send the data directly back to the home base so it can instantly be analyzed. And to see some of that technology take place is fun.
And so you've had those machines out for a couple of years, 2 years, 3 years?
You folks bought the very first one in 2018.
Okay.
Yep. So we're going into, was it season
Going
4
into
now?
season 4 now.
Yeah.
And I would say from our standpoint, I know talking to our soybean research group, all the technology is helping to make that so much nicer. And the funny thing is you talk about being a twin, right? And the thought is, you can harvest, twice as fast. And I think our team would say, no, it's more than that, right? It's really more like a factor of 3 or 4 when you think about moving around the field and you think about all the other parts of that. They say, yeah, it's just a real game changer.
It really is. And, as part of, we're an engineering company that's really good at manufacturing. We used to think we were a manufacturing company, and then we came to that realization. But as part of that, the R&D process is that we're developing new technologies that never existed before. And when you're doing that, you're going into what I would call somewhat of the unknown. So when we actually brought the first split research combine to the market, we would normally say, well, it's going to do twice as much. It's going to be able to be twice as efficient. And after we actually started using these machines, we learned that it was 3 times, or like you said, almost 4. And so that is a challenging but also fun part of what we do, is getting into that unknown and, learning some things that you never would have guessed would have taken place.
Well, and again, just the attention to detail on the equipment that you guys create. Again, we're working with very small scale plots, and so having that number accurate is so important. I remember from my standpoint looking at, the grain table on that machine, and even on the crossbars, it's sort of a octagon shape maybe. And I remember them saying to me, well, that's because you don't want a plant a single stem to hang up on that bar. And because when you're only got 9 feet or 12 feet, that one plant's pretty important. And so even to that level of detail, it's just so precise, and all the thought that went into those machines and all the other items that you make. So again, you've got this long history of innovation. I mean, are there things that you look back and you think, now in hindsight, well, I'm kind of surprised we pulled that off?
Well, we try to do an estimate when we get ready to build a new product, and there's been some tremendous overruns and tremendous mistakes that have been made. But out of mistakes, you learn, and that's the creative part of it, is you have to be able to deal with the problems. And one of the things that Stine says is Stines have yield. Well, ALMACO has service. We have a service department that is the best in the industry. And yes, we're going to have trouble because we're dealing with mechanical things. But when we do have trouble, we have people on the job, on that machine, trying to get it repaired as quickly as we possibly can. We have people stationed in various states across the Midwest that cut down on the travel time, and you've got to be able to service your customer. And of course, we're fortunate that Stine's about an hour away and we can be on site. And in many cases, you may have to be down there at night because they're running at night. They're running until they can't run.
Yeah, that was another thing I was going to mention. So on these R2 combines, they're so robust and they're so capable that when they're running in corn, they're running these machines 24 hours a day. And the only time they're stopping is to get fuel, unload, and maybe grab some dinner. And I mean, it's pretty incredible to see that taking place. I mean, I've been down in the Stine field at midnight trying it with some other technicians, trying to get some things worked out. And Gary mentioned there is you're not watching the clock.
And I have heard them say that the rumor is that if Stine can't break it, then it's ready to go to market. Is there any truth to that?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a wonderful partnership on developing equipment because you've got people that are going to work it and work it hard. And out of that, we're going to continue to develop robust equipment that's going to hold up under the conditions that they're putting it through. I don't know of anybody in the industry that works these machines any harder than Stine. And we're thankful that they do.
Yeah, if you got somebody that's up against some tough things, you ask the question, well, do you think they're going to need the Stine option?
Good. I'm sure there's lots of different things going on and a lot of different things you have your eyes on. I guess curious about things that maybe are coming down the pipe. Are there new things? Are there things you're really excited about that maybe are either going to be a step change for what we already know or new things we haven't seen?
Yeah, I tell you what, there's so much excitement in that area going on right now. And just some of the things that come to mind are, one would be our mechanical seed corn pollination. And what this does is it increases yield. It increases the purity of the crosses. It gives you a rescue field ability and the opportunity to produce much higher oil content in the seed. And this is mechanical pollination mainly in corn right now, where we're collecting pollen mechanically. And then we have the ability, or we have to develop technology through some partnerships to where we can take that pollen and go back to the same field or any other field and pollinate. And so pretty exciting stuff. I know we have plans to get that in front of Stine here this next year, and we're looking forward to doing that. We've got some new planter technology that we've launched this season called Seed Pro Elite, which has a new user interface and control system. And this is going to allow for more flexible research applications, which Gary talked about. There's so many different applications throughout the industry. And ease of operator setup and productivity. And, operator interface is just such a huge component of what we do, to where we can make a product and make it very technical, but if it's hard to use, people aren't going to like it. And then, really, I talked about it a little earlier. I was talking to my brother, and he said, well, tell him data, data, data. It's all about the data and gathering that data, whether it's through vision sensing technology or plant phenotyping, working with autonomy or telematics or artificial intelligence. And so it's just it's an exciting time, and they say that technology is changing faster than it ever has at this moment. Mm-hmm. And every moment that goes by, it's just going to change faster.
One of the things that's been exciting over the years of my career is seeing what Stine has done to the yield of soybeans. 50 years ago, soybeans, if you hit 30 bushels to the acre, you were lucky.
Right.
And we've seen some tremendous yields come out of the Stine products. It's just been very exciting to see this. Also, Stine has been an innovator in the row spacing that they are using. They went, I believe it's to 22-inch rows here several years ago, and technology and information was given the reason that they went to this row spacing. And that was a big jump for them. We had to redo a lot of equipment to accommodate that, but it all has paid off. There's much bigger yields coming out of the corn and soybeans now with this row change for Stine. So once again, innovation on part of Stine.
Yeah, and when it comes to row spacing, you're right. That's a cultural shift that takes a lot of planning, especially for the equipment side of it. And we always tell people, we're making those changes now because we like to be, a decade or more ahead of where the farmer is. So if we want to tell you where we think you're going to go, we have to be testing it today, both from a genetics perspective, but even from a, production perspective. And so, yeah, we've been big believers in narrower row spacing or sub-30 row spacing. So, it occurs to me that ALMACO is, of course, for us is a household name because it's such an important part of what we do. And I think most corn and soybean farmers would recognize the name, or at least recognize the blue equipment that they see in the field, out of the research plots. But what would you want farmers to know about the work that you do and how it impacts their operation?
Sure. So a couple things come to mind. One of them is just to share with them, try to share the knowledge of how robust our equipment truly is. And throughout my career, when I've been out working with cooperators and things like that, they'll be quizzing me about our machines and our equipment, and I'll explain what we're up to. And a lot of times I would hear the phrase, "Oh, you guys make those little toy combines." Last season, one of the Stine R2 combines ran 19 days straight and averaged 21 hours a day, nonstop. And then you couple that with this machine is going from a stop to full speed and then a stop every 10 seconds.
Right.
And it's doing it 24 hours a day. I mean, you couple those two things together, and I don't know if there's much commercial equipment out there that could boast those kind of numbers and performance.
I don't think so.
And so that's one thing that comes to mind. The other one, and this is one that my dad shared with me a number of years ago, is that when the farmers are looking out over their fields, looking at all the fields across the United States and somewhat globally, is that every one of the varieties that farmer has ever planted, that variety was most likely developed at some point in time with a piece of ALMACO research technology. And, that really illustrates how ALMACO is having a global impact on mankind. And we feel pretty good about that, and we're proud of being a part of that and helping feed the world.
Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it.
As we wrap this up, I really would like to thank the Stine people, and particularly Harry and Bill Eby, who I've been the closest to, for their loyalty to our company and for trusting us with their research equipment. So once again, thank you.
I appreciate you guys coming today. I was going to close by saying, I did this morning ask our research crew, I said, I just need a tally here so that we can keep track. And the number I got back from Rodney Pennico was we have currently 57 of your harvesters. 8 of those are the R2s. And then we have 26 planters that are enabled with ALMACO equipment. So I think that's a testament to how much we value the relationship and how much we value the equipment that you guys provide. And we couldn't, frankly, put together the kind of research program and deliver the products we do to growers without the help of organizations like ALMACO.
Well, thank you.
We've been visiting today with Christian and Gary Clem of ALMACO about the company's position as an industry leader in custom seed research equipment. Gary and Christian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yep.
It's been a fun time.
Our pleasure, David.
Well, that's our time for today. I'd like to thank our guests and our listeners for joining us on another episode of the Stine Seedcast. We'll be back again soon with more expert interviews and insights about all things Stine. And to never miss an episode, Subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found.
Subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found. To learn more about Stine and its elite corn and soybean genetics, visit stineseed.com. Stine has yield.